Michael, how did you find carnivore?
Well, couple of, I mean, it's multi-threaded, Dave. Um, back in the day, or a few years ago, so I observed Jordan Peterson talking about it. I've heard Joe Rogan talking about it. Um, uh, I was, one of my workmates is a advocate, and he'd come across to my lunch table and say, "Oh, that stuff over there is looking pretty good, but I'm not so convinced about, those terrible vegetables or whatever it might be." And the kick in the rear end, so to speak, was watching an interview with a medical professional, and the host asked the medical professional, what's happened? You've lost all this weight, and the medical professional responded, like everything else is secondary. If you're morbidly obese, then anything else you do is just playing around the edges. Fundamentally, in order to be healthy, you need to be in a decent health range, and so that was sufficient motivation, plus a range of other things that I could get into to just get across that line.
Right.
And my workmate would be like, go and look at some Sean Baker, or here's Ken Berry, here's Anthony Chaffee, here's some people you might want to look into, and so look into those sorts of types, and they got a fairly easy prescription to follow to actually get in, what to expect, and things like that, which made it pretty achievable.
So, did you have any like weight or other health issues that kind of made you feel like, well, this is something I might want to try?
Yeah, well, I started off sort of in the 100 to 105 kg weight range, and that's sort of heading into morbidly obese territory. A few years ago, I managed to convince my wife to let me jump out of an aeroplane, and they had a weight limit of 100 kgs, and like I tried to struggle to get under 100 kgs, and I was ended up being 103 or something. So I had to suffer the ignominy of paying $8 a kg extra to be able to get onto the plane, to be able to jump out of the damn thing. Um, yeah, so there's that. And then also when you look at or listen to or pay attention to the content coming out of Dr. Sean Baker, etc., they talk about all the other sort of things that are associated with proper human diet, so to speak. Um, yeah. But the initial kick was weight loss, and so I started this journey at the start of April at 102, 103-ish sort of kgs. And now I'm sort of sitting around the 80 kg mark. So still
Oh,
like
wow, that's
from
awesome.
yeah, man. But let me continue. I have more. So that still puts me in like slightly overweight in terms of the BMI, and but like I said, I started off. This was all about weight, but what it's really turned into is metabolic health. Um, you know, listening to that content, who would have thought that the half-life of seed oil, which destroys the function or the functional ability of cells to do what they're supposed to do, is 650 days, Dave. Like if you have seed oil, this half of it is going to persist in your system for like a couple of years. Um, it's just so strange that these things are sort of in your environment, and they're just taken as regular. So anyway, so I started off as okay, well, I need to get the weight into a decent range if I want to, have any sort of quality of life moving into, you know, whatever it is. I'm like 50, early 50s at the moment. So, yeah, this is sort of general sort of programming, I'd almost describe it. People are programmed to think that body deterioration is a natural function of age. And so, are you too old to be doing this? Or, what do you expect? Your life is going to become more terrible the older you get. But the further you go into this carnivore rabbit hole, the more you realize that that's actually a false narrative. What you really want to be doing is getting out of the way of this amazing organism that is a human body to actually look after itself and do what it needs to do. I was having this conversation with a workmate the other day about, well, it seems like the function of food in modern society is an entertainment mechanism, but actually the function of food is nutrition to support life. And it was like, okay, well, now that you've taken that entertainment away, what do you do for entertainment? It's like, well, you know what? Um, a couple of months ago now, I started learning the guitar. I mean, that feels like that's a much healthier and fulfilling journey to be going on in terms of entertainment and curiosity with the world than, going into some sort of perpetual state of sickness. You know, um, hmm. And so then, I mean, I feel like it could be coming. I'll beat you to the question. What sorts of things have I moved on to? Now that I'm not so focused on weight, and I would say I was, if not already diabetic, certainly pre-diabetic. Every day I came home from work, I'd have sore feet, and the first thing I'd do, I'll be grumpy old man entering the house, desperate to get his shoes off, and until he got his shoes off, don't talk to me, because I'll be so grumpy because my feet were sore. Um, and so there was almost like swelling or inflammation or something like that in the feet. I'm just going to start from the bottom and work my way up. I had um, sort of toenail fungal infections that no matter what I did, they just continually deteriorated and got worse. And that stuff is getting better. One thing I would say about a low carb or carnivore diet is it's not some sort of cure-all. It doesn't necessarily fix everything, but what it does do is it makes everything better. It so incrementally improves things. So the toenail fungus isn't necessarily eradicated, but it's heading in the right direction. The feet are 90 to 95% better than they were. They're not perfect, but it's a step change in difference. And if I keep on going up the body, it's used to have a lot more problems with skin conditions like eczema and things like that around the back of my knees, and sweaty areas like under arms and on hands and things like that. That is like, again, similar to the feet. It's not perfect, but it's so much better. Um, I used to, well, I think I must have got diagnosed with asthma or something like that when I was maybe 3 or 4 or something like that. So for the last 50 years, I've been on an increasing diet of pharmaceuticals to help with asthma, right? So, I started off back in the day on Ventolin, then would go to, steroids like Pulmicort, and my current regimen is Briconal. But in April, I'll be taking 2 puffs of Briconal morning and night. Now I'm taking 1 puff every second day. And I've got like a peak flow meter. I can measure my lung capacity, and I can make micro adjustments. So I can just give the body sort of what I was going back to earlier. It's like getting out of the way of your body. I can sort of observe how my body is, the physiology of my body is behaving, and then sort of help it when it needs to, as opposed to sort of overwhelming it with my environment, so to speak. So that I would say general aches and pains. So like sore knees, sore elbows, sore feet, sore shoulders. I'd wake up. I'd struggle to sleep at night because I'd have sore shoulders. That sort of pain has gone away. Um, and the and the one that is I find the most bizarre, it's eyesight. Like I was convinced that I was basically, not in the not too distant future, I'll be blind, and because of, Jordan Peterson describes it in his context as well, and I didn't really believe it until I experienced it myself. That these floaters, and you'd sort of have these patches of blindness that would sort of just be in your vision. That's so again, it's not perfect. I mean, I still wear glasses, but the trajectory has, gone from deteriorating to improving. It's amazing. Yeah. So there's a whole range of, I feel like I'm definitely missing some things out, but but on balance, it's chalk and cheese day.
Yeah. So do you kind of feel like carnivores enabled you to just get out of the way of your body and allow it to do its thing?
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing is the mental. So I've just talked about the physiological. Um, I had a family member pass away recently. They were a 7-hour drive away. Like pre-carnivore, I'd drive for 7 hours and I'd be wrecked for a couple of days. Like post-carnivore, drive somewhere 7 hours, and I'm tired, but it's that magnitude thing. It's a different game. Like a good night's sleep, and I'm fine the next day. Or I drive, somewhere for 4 hours, and there's actually no skin up my nose at all. I don't get a sore back in the car. I'm mentally alert. And then from a performance perspective, from a mental performance perspective, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'll be struggling to stay awake before. And now it's like my wife's ringing me saying it's 7 o'clock, you're still at work, what's going on? It's like I'm doing shit, I'm getting it done. That sort of mental stamina exists that didn't exist before. It's just bonkers, it's just and I hear like you've interviewed with other people, and you'll ask them, okay, so what sort of influence have you had on the people around you, and have you been able to convince anyone? I feel that it's something you've got to discover for yourself, and if you're not open to it, you're not open to it, and it's a bit like parenting. Um, all you can really do is model behavior. And one of the things I really appreciate about the carnivore diet, as opposed to something like veganism, there's a lot more tolerance and acceptance. You've got to find your own way, and finding your own way is having a bit of dairy or having keto-ish or whatever it is. If that's what you need to do to manage, then that's what you need to do to manage. That's yeah.
Yeah, I agree on the people have almost got to find their own way. I spoke to a guest a while back that I think had a good approach to kind of dealing with people that came to I think it was a lady, came to her and said, um, how do I do what you've done? How do I lose that weight? How do I feel better? And she kind of got a little bit tired of going over and over and over the same thing, only to have people go, "Oh yeah, sounds interesting, but that's not for me." So what she does is she gives them a whole load of videos to watch first. Like she'll give them a Ken Berry getting started video and all this kind of thing first, and she'll say, "Go and watch those. And after you've watched those, if you're still interested, come back and talk to me then." And it's like you're saying, go and actually invest your own time first, and then and then come back. And if you're still interested, then you're probably going to give it a proper try.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean those guys like Chafee, Berry, and Baker, they're all doctors, so you're going to be hard pressed to be able to describe the benefits and the process in a better way than what they can. What someone like yourself and a conversation with a colleague or a friend or a family member, that's more around support and experience, but and sort of some sort of guidance and okay, I've got this weird and wacky thing that's happening over here. How should I deal with that? But there's just so many resources available, and that's certainly the path that my workmate took in terms of check out this video from Sean Baker or whatever it is, And there's almost like Jordan Peterson's got the expression. It might be biblical. The burden of sacrifice must be taken on board willingly. Like if someone is prepared to take on that time commitment, sacrifice those precious hours of the day, then you've got some skin in the game. Up until then, it's just all noise. It does remind me of it, like, does that whole, reminds me of, my wife's got rheumatoid arthritis. She's a walking, chemist, you go into the cupboard and there's so many pharmaceuticals, and she's been gracious enough to go down this journey with me. So it's a bit of a family effort, or at least a spousal effort. But what she's really struggling with is getting that sort of pharmaceutical alignment to diet. Like the theory would be that because you're not so inflamed, you need to make some micro adjustments to the pharmaceutical inputs that you're having. And so I went with her to some sort of holistic health person, right? And I've definitely had a variable experience when it comes to engaging with medical professionals. And one of the it's like humans need fiber. Humans need um, carbohydrates. 95% of humans are genetically incompatible with carnivore. And so I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, I tend to go with the chafy argument of the only way that humans survived the Ice Age is to be adapted to eating nutritional food that was only available during then, those sort of periods of time. And so for somebody that would otherwise to be quite intelligent, it can be quite hard to maintain composure when you're faced with like this nonsense, frankly. But then I do find my workmate who sort of helped me on this journey. He's got a fairly decent way of explaining it. And it's like you can't really blame those people because that's what they've been programmed to think and to say. And so, if that's what you've been exposed to and that's what you've been taught, and you haven't really been curious to go outside of those walls, well, then that just explains so much, Dave.
Yeah, it's kind of like when that's all you've known, then you've got no reason to doubt it, right? So it's like if
Mm.
you tell kids as they're growing up that I don't know, remember they used to say something like, there's you could go from China to Australia or something through I can't remember what it was, but like you could get the
Dig a
when
hole to China.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. And
Mm.
if everyone always took that seriously and actually said, well, that is something that exists as children are growing up, and they're never told that it's a joke or that it's untrue or whatever, they would have no reason to disbelieve it. And I guess that's where doctors kind of are, like they're just told that one thing and no one ever contradicts it. So
The thing that gets
until
me,
they meet us.
the thing that gets me is that they say it with such confidence in the absence of data. It does, like Jordan Peterson also describes one of the interesting things about high IQ people. Like if you I think he's got an IQ of 150 or something like that. But if you're in that sort of upper echelon, then what that means is you've got a propensity to know a hell of a lot about a small range of things, and you make the mistake of thinking that actually your breadth of competence is full, but actually you've got massive blind spots. And so I think there's a bit of that. And from my perspective, you know, I'm a big believer in personal responsibility. So if you be you, if you want to think that. Show me your data. It's a bit like actually doing. I'm quite reasonably heavily in the AI space, right? Leading this AI group in the business that I work in, and it's like, okay, well, where did you source that information from? Um, you put up some sort of trust but verify, or I don't trust and I'm going to verify. But if you're just choosing to blindly accept what people are telling you, well, that's on you. You don't have to do that.
Yeah, I kind of felt I feel like the job that I had before kind of put me in this same similar kind of mindset. Like I'm a software developer, and when you're constantly looking for problems and debugging stuff, you're kind of always looking for, well, I need to actually find what's causing this. I'm not interested in the theory of why this might be happening. I need to find out exactly why it's happening. And so you're always kind of drilling down and debugging to find the actual cause of the whatever the software problem or the crash or whatever. And so that's what I find is kind of lacking in the medical profession is they're focused on the theory rather than the practicalities of what they see in front of them, or the results that can be achieved.
I tend to think of it more of like incentive structures. Like the Thomas Sowell sort of perspective is like humans respond to incentives. I sort of flip-flopped a little bit because it's some sort of combination of the environment you are plus the incentive structures equals human behavior is sort of how I sort of contemplate it. A little bit probably more philosophical, maybe. And certainly I've got quite an interest in philosophy, theology, psychology, which is what I generally consume. It's just because you should doesn't mean you just because you can doesn't mean you should. But I'm thinking about in the medical profession, you got like time slots. Okay, so I need to get through these patients. I've got this background training which it's focused on a band-aid at the bottom of the cliff. I've got patients who by and large are just coming in looking for quick fixes and not actually interested in sacrificing to get to the root cause. So they actually, a friend of mine used to be a GP and he couldn't handle it because of this type of thing. Uh, he told me a story where he got instructed not to bother with root cause because you're wasting your time. So it's almost like that is taken away because actually it's not going to do anything because the majority of people that are coming in, they just want the fix. And I'm having this sort of mild health problem at the moment, the hernia, right? And I've got an uncle I would imagine he's got something similar. And so I'm over there for, a cup of tea, catch up, he's in every time at home. And he's been like griping away and moaning about being in pain for the last couple of months. And he tells a story about going to the doctor and getting some pain medication, which was amazing because it took away the pain. He had zero interest in understanding what was causing that pain. He just wasn't interested, which I just found quite astounding. It's like, okay, well, I'll hop onto Perplexity and AI tool, whatever it is, do some Googling, figure out what the most likely cause of the pain is, what are the things I can do, what sort of exercises can I do to manage it. Doesn't resolve to my satisfaction, make a trip to the doctor. Doctor confirms my AI diagnosis and, yep, you're doing the right thing and here's some things to, so a little bit of extra information. But actually, with the internet, if you're curious, you can make a good start and then get that supported or refuted if it sort of turns out to be a false type of thing. But it took me ages to just come to terms with the fact that my uncle had zero interest in what was causing the pain. And so I was talking about this with my workmate, and he was like, "Well, I don't understand, Michael, why you'd find this um, incongruent, because that's what he's been trained. My uncle has been trained. You've got pain, go to a doctor. Doctor will give you medication. Medication will solve the problem. Go home into your state of deterioration until death. And that's sort of how the programming is set up."
Yeah, and it's kind of human nature, like, I guess, like, your brain is always gonna look for the easiest route to do something, right? It's always gonna be like, "Okay, well, what's the best way through this maze?" And so, as humans, we've allowed ourselves to kind of be trained into this, well, there must be a drug for everything that every illness or every problem. Um, and when you look at the most successful kind of sales copy that's out there, selling, magic solutions and all this kind of thing, it's basically all focused on the same thing, giving people a magic button to press to get rid of the problem that they're experiencing.
The other thing that strikes me when you talk about it like that is that it's a lot to ask your average human to have the tools to fight back against a whole marketing machine that has been developed. And we can sort of talk about that in the food space as well. Like, how is a human supposed to resist a food that is engineered to be hyper palatable? How is a human psychology where are the tools that exist to ignore the KFC sign when you're driving down the road? Now, this sort of environment has been constructed not to suit you, but to suit some sort of commercially driven enterprise. Don't get me wrong, I'm pro-capitalist. I'm a big believer in capitalism lifting the West and humanity out of poverty at an astounding rate. But I do think that there's definitely an imperative at the level of the individual to take personal responsibility, understand the game you're in, not to succumb to the battle, but actually to concentrate on winning the war. And the war in this case is I want to get to a ripe old happy age in the best shape I can. And if I take on board that marketing material, and if I consume that hyper palatable food, then that is actually counter to my objective. And then also, like the other thing that occurred to me when you're talking about like the human propensity to want the quick fix and the magic button. I do feel like there's some sort of fracturing of that. I feel like with things like COVID and people changing positions, forming diametrically opposed positions, or just forming positions which don't make sense. The one that sort of stands out to me is in the middle of Black Lives Matter protests. That was actually more prescient and more important than COVID. But the day before, it's like if you went outside, grandmother, you're going to kill your grandmother. So, so it's I feel like there's this something like an awakening. I feel like there's people are beginning to understand that the actors in the game that they're playing don't necessarily have your best interest at heart, and so as a consequence of that, you've actually got to make your own decisions. One of my favourite quotes is a Mark Twain quote from late 18th century, whenever it was. It's if you don't read the news, you're uninformed. If you do read the news, you're misinformed. Humans have this theory that the times that we're living in are different. Actually, they're not really. This is almost like the natural state. And when you sort of think about it like that, war, misinformation, disinformation, uh, I feel like the education system has a lot to answer for in terms of giving people the tools to be able to fight back against that environmental the overwhelming, like I was talking about with the hyper-palatable food and the psychological war that is the marketing function of organisations. Like people don't have the tools at their disposal to be able to effectively shield themselves against that as a consequence of those very things infiltrating into the education system. But the good news is that content has never been as available. Like we talked about, how do you get somebody into carnivore? Well, you know what? There's a million videos on it. If you're interested in something, and if you're prepared to put some time and effort into it. But I talked about, I'm no longer entertaining my mouth with hyperpalatable food, so I'm learning the guitar. So the last time I tried to pick up a guitar and learn the guitar, I was in Scotland. I had some sort of guy down the road, pay him 50 quid a fortnight or a week or whatever it was, and I'd go and struggle away at the guitar for half an hour, and then go home and revert back. I just bought an app, paid essentially 3 guitar lessons, and now I can do 2 guitar lessons a day where I'm getting instant feedback. It's telling me if I'm hitting the chord or the fret or the note. I can play along, got my headphones on. It's just, you're interested and curious. There's just so much opportunity to learn if you're curious about your world. And like I gave the example of the seed oil before. I don't really have too many hard lines when it comes to what I put in my mouth, but there's no way in hell I'm ever putting seed oil in my mouth again if I can help it, because the consequences are so catastrophic.
Yeah, that So, yeah, just to go back onto I agree with everything you said there. Just to go back to what you said about the awakening, I think of all the kind of dark things around the COVID era, I think the one silver lining from that was that it did wake a lot of people up and start asking questions about things and start, looking into what am I eating? What is this stuff? You know,
Yeah,
but
why am I taking why am I basically prescribed asthma medication on ever increasing doses for the rest of my life? Why? What is going on there? Surely there's another way. Doesn't make any sense.
yeah, and especially when you kind of look at the animal kingdom, right? There's no the animal kingdom doesn't suffer chronic disease like we do. So except dogs, because dogs are basically the same as us, you know.
Actually, we do have a couple of dogs, and and um, and I started giving my wife a bit of jip because she'll be feeding them rice, and I'm like, "What are you doing? These are dogs." I do appreciate that the human digestive system is actually more carnivore than dogs, believe it or not. It's shorter, but that organism that you're looking at that is a dog is designed for meat. If we're going down this path, then we seriously need to, and we love our animals, which we do, then if we love them, then we need to be giving them meat because that's what they're designed for. And like those studies about the average lifespan of was it the golden retriever or whatever it is, 50 years ago it was like 15 years, and now because of poor diet it's under 10. I mean, there's someone needs to be, taken to court for that because that's terrible, you know.
Yeah, and dogs get diabetes now. It's like because we're feeding them the same garbage we're eating. Yeah, it's pretty bad. But it's just so interesting. They're basically the mirror of us. You could say we're both facultative carnivores, and the same problems happen when they're doing the same stuff as us. It's crazy.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, But I'm interested in one thing you were talking about. Like, I agree, it's personal responsibility. Like, we should all be thinking about what we're actually what we're putting into our bodies and doing the best we can to kind of eat the best food possible. Um, but I, you know, generally speaking, when you go into a supermarket, I think the majority of the people have been so miseducated. They're walking around the cereal aisle, looking at the colorful boxes and going, "This one's low fat and has no cholesterol, so this one's good for me. This is healthy for me." And, they've got their aches and their pains and whatever, and they're thinking, "One of these days, if I just keep eating this granola or this bran cereal or whatever it is, I'm gonna be good." But
It reminds me, I went for a walk with a couple, I try and get a minimum of 7,000 steps in a day. I go for a walk with a couple of my workmates, and they did not believe me when I told them the Kellogg's backstory. You know, it's like, this stuff is theological in origin. It's got nothing to do with nutrition or health. It's all about ideology. And when you're talking about the cereal aisle, the one that gets me is the orange juice. I mean, I can't see any evidence of anyone making a health claim that says that juice is good for you because it's just been so well debunked. But people still walk around thinking, okay, I'm gonna have this orange juice and it's good for me. It makes no sense. People still do it.
And like I'm pretty sure that some of these food companies or drink companies actually they do little devious things to even make their products seem healthier. like in the some orange juices, like shelf stable orange juices, they'll put like something in it so it feels like there's a bit of orange pith left in the juice or something, you know? And it's so that you feel like, oh man, this one must be healthier.
I can't remember who it was. It might have been Shanti or Berry. But it was, if there's some sort of claim that's being made on the packaging, walk away. Walk away fast. You know, what was it? I was looking at some sort of product the other day, and it was like rainforest certified. What does that even mean? You know, what it means is maybe more people will buy it. That's all it means.
Yeah. It's like the fact there's a health food section in the supermarket, and it's like, well, what's all the other stuff then? And 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 in the health food section, that's where you find the most processed stuff that's probably is in the supermarket, right? Like the energy bars and the garbage with canola oil and everything in it, you know?
I feel like there's a. I mean, I am a big Thomas Sowell fan, so I do have a tendency to go back to incentives. You know, like the supermarket is a money printing machine, and the way that that supermarket prints the most amount of money is it shifts the most amount of product, and the easiest product to shift is and store and get margin on, even if it's lower margin, is highly processed, shelf stable food. You know, like pastas, bread, flour, all those sort of cans of fruit and vegetables. All of that stuff is they can just use it to make money. And and the tragedy of it all really is that all of that other stuff, you know, appreciate we're promoting, well, possibly promoting carnivore, but if you're like wrapping fresh fruit and vegetables around the side, you know, you talk about the perimeter of the supermarket, yeah, all of that stuff that is sort of being pushed down is actually local. So if you want to support local, you really should be avoiding the middle of the supermarket altogether and just going around the outside. One of the things that I haven't talked about is I had trouble pronouncing it is satiety. Is
Ah,
like is fulfillment. One of the things that I've always struggled with, and I describe it as my primary vice, is gluttony. You know, like give me, you know, there's an open bag of salt and vinegar potato chips on the table. You know, I walk past that bag is now gone, as is the one that was in the cupboard behind it, because I would just like I can't. My ability to resist was gone. You know, like when I in pre-April, when I was eating carbohydrates. Now it is okay. Well, that's tempting for 5 seconds. Contemplate the consequences, and it's so easy, Dave. Honestly, it's transformational. Like people talk about. Um, oh, I can never do that. It's so restricting. Well, how about you don't have to be in a starvation state and constantly hungry? How about you don't have blood sugar peaks and troughs, which cause all sorts of mood and mental capacity issues, and you know maybe even mental health issues like around anxiety and depression. Um, it's I don't I'm not, that was just one of the things that just blew me away. Like probably in the I'd say in the 2000s, my wife and I did, you know, we're in a similar sort of overweight state, and we did the Atkins diet for probably 6 to 9 months, and sure we lost the weight, but that gluttony impulse didn't go away, and it wasn't sustainable. Um, I feel like with the carnivore diet, sure I have some cheats. Like tonight, I had cream and a few mushrooms. So it was carnivore rather than carnivore. It was amazing. My wife is an amazing cook. And that is 100% sustainable. You know, the other really, because in essence it's an elimination diet, you can run it if you're on the carnivore diet. You can run experiments. So I started the carnivore diet in April. I noticed coming into July, I've been drinking probably a bit more whiskey than I would be good for me. I sort of some of the people I follow on the internet promote alcohol is a poison. Certainly those doctors I talk about, and Jordan Peterson is teetotal. And so I said, okay, let's run the experiment. How about for July, I just don't have any alcohol, and let's see what happens. So I go through July, didn't really notice any difference. But then, 1st of August rolls around, it's like, righty ho, I'm going to have some whiskey. And you know what? I had a couple of whiskeys. Didn't go overboard. Had like 3 or 4 whiskeys. So mellow, not rolling around the floor, making an idiot of myself or anything like that. But you know what? The next day, my performance was compromised. Why would I want to do that to myself? And before I did the carnivore diet, there's a Jamie Oliver tomato and basil and chicken schnitzel recipe that I used to whip up every fortnight or so, and then stuff myself with pasta to go along with it. So okay, let's just try this without pasta, see what happens. And so I did that, and you know what? I had a can of tomatoes. My eczema was the worst it had been since I started. So I'm running the experiment. I'm seeing I feel like one of the interesting things that happens when you're on a carnivore diet is because you're taking away the inflammation because you're on an elimination diet, any underlying sensitivities that you have to foods, it immediately manifests, and you can understand the impact it's having on your body. Like I've got follow a bit of Joe Rogan. He raves about his Traeger. I've got a Traeger wood pellet smoker out there. Get a flavour meat, put a slather in some sort of beef, meat rub, put it on, cook it, perfect. And that rub gave me reflux for 36 hours. I didn't. That was a new phenomenon. Like I hadn't experienced that because I feel like my body was so degraded, it wasn't actually even able to respond to the toxicity that I was putting into it. But now I know. Okay, go whole hog on the butter. Go whole hog on the salt. It doesn't have a negative downstream impact. But I know I can run like with the asthma medication. Okay, so I'm having 2 puffs in the morning, 2 puffs at night. Measure my peak flow. We're sitting at what 560, whatever that is, whatever that measurement is. Let's see if we can get that down to 0. But talk to my ex-GP friend about how to do that safely. Graduate it down to 0. And then you know what? The lung capacity degrades. Okay, that's fine. Let's just bump it back up and then just go N plus 1. So instead of going to 0, which would be optimal, I'm now like an 8. 1 puff every second day, and that's all I need. I just need to get out of the way. Even hesitant to describe it as an organism because we're like a collection of organisms, in our body. There's so much microbiome, but there's just so much capacity in the human system to look after itself that really the thing that you most want to avoid is getting in the way of it doing what it needs to do. Yeah. The other thing that occurs to me when we're having this conversation, which I wanted to bring up, was when we're having the conversation with this holistic doctor with my wife, she starts lecturing me on cholesterol. It's like, it's a lot more complicated than you think. It's not such an easy thing. You need to measure the whole the whole range of signals on your blood test to be able to actually form some sort of conclusion. I go with the Sean Baker approach, Dave. It's like, okay, I can tell you based on how I feel, and if I feel if my inputs are aligned to an ancestral human diet, I'm not doing anything crazy. If all the health signals are good, then why would I even need a blood test? It's like this is just another mechanism for getting money into someone's system. I remember the first time Sean Baker went on to Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan, had never really heard of carnivore. It's like, who the hell is this crazy Sean Baker guy on my podcast about only eating meat? What the hell is going on here? And he was like, jokes big on the stats on the data to back it up to claim. And Sean's just sitting there saying, why? You know, if I'm in peak health, I'm setting world records at, for my age range. I'm feeling good. Why do I even need to do the measurement?
You're right as well. The blood tests, it's almost like this is the in sales, like this is the kind of invitation to the presentation at someone's house so that they can then start selling you other stuff, you know.
Mm. Yeah, I remember like because I'm a big fan of data to inform decisions. War for ignorance is pretty evil, really. You need to have data to inform decisions. And I remember like, okay, so I'm watching this. Okay, and a few of the carnivore people, they'll be like, must get your blood work done, so that you can make some adjustments, whatever. So I was like, okay, in my New Zealand context, what are my options? And so I find somewhere in $300 or $400, whatever it is, I can go and get some blood work done. And I text my friend who used to be a GP, and I said, "What do you reckon?" He said, "You've got rocks in your head, mate." I mean, this, what his experience had been with people getting that sort of data is it increases anxiety, and there's nothing that people can actually do about it. So you'll get some data back. It may or may not be useful, depending on who you talk to, will depend on how it gets interpreted. And then, does this mean I'm not going to sleep because I think I'm going to die of a heart attack? It's like there's the value, the return on investment versus just consuming food which is appropriate for human nutrition. It just doesn't stack up in my estimation. But going back to my, everyone's got to find their own path.
Mm.
The other thing that strikes me, Dave, is I just can't believe it. Like if you'd said to me in January, you know what, Michael, in April, you're going to say, how with the standard Western diet, I'm going to eat meat. I'm going to eat butter, salt. I'm going to continue to eat a little bit of dairy. I'm going to transition to cream. Try and keep as much of it on the cheese as possible. And that is going to provide you all the nutrition that you need on a day-to-day basis. It just doesn't make any sense. Like I've been programmed to okay, I go to the supermarket, fresh fruit and veggies, get some carbohydrates. I need some fiber. I need all these inputs to be able to give me the nutrition I need. It just doesn't seem to make sense that all the nutrition that you need exists in ruminant meat. It's mind-boggling. I still can't really believe it, honestly.
Yeah. But the more I feel the more you think about it, the more it starts to make sense when you kind of when you start thinking about things like, for example, buy a loaf of white bread. They'll tell you it's white bread's fine, but probably you'd be better with brown bread, whatever reason that is. But bread's good for you in moderation, right? But you take that loaf of bread down to the lake and there's a big sign, don't feed the ducks bread, it's bad for them, they'll get sick. And it's, oh, but it's okay for me, is it?
So it reminds me of the Ghostbusters, where there's a Twinkie that's 50 years old. And it's still in pristine condition. It's like you're trying to tell me that that's good for me. Yeah, yeah, it's odd. Like when you say about the brown. Like I've heard some sort of evidence that actually white is better, but for some reason it's just worked its way. When I say better, comparatively better, and then you think about it from a nutritional perspective. I'm not aware of any vitamins or minerals that exist in carbohydrates which support metabolic function. I'm not aware of any material benefits other than maybe for sprinters in terms of energy output from carbohydrates. For the vast majority of people, being in a ketogenic state is the optimal state to be in. It doesn't make any sense. But it might not make any sense. But you know what? It's working for me, and pretty happy I found it, and like a little bit disappointed when my daughter bakes an awesome smelling loaf of sourdough bread and leaves it sitting on the bench. That she's not sort of joining me on the journey, but I do also think that I abused my body for 40 years. Like I smoked for 30 years. I I would look at photos of myself when I was a teenager, and I was like, that's the skinny guy that would be running around dragging fish out of the lake. And then over the course of 40 years, so look at a photo of myself, and I got this big protruding stomach, I got puffy face, I just look like I'm inflamed, and you sort of think that that's the natural path, but it doesn't have to be.
Exactly, yeah.
And so, but my point is I feel that if I hadn't if I hadn't done those negative things to my body, then maybe I could have a little bit of sourdough now. But unfortunately, I need to sort of try to get back as close to the optimal state as possible, and that means it's really off the table.
Yeah, and there's very few of us that don't do all those bad things to our body, and that's the problem, you know?
Well, you
But
just need to look at those photos of the crowd at the beach in the 1950s versus the crowd at the beach now. It's like something has gone wrong, and one of the things that really aggravates me is the people responsible for the food pyramid need to go to jail because that is just terrible. It's just not good.
yeah, it's yeah, and in the States, they've now replaced the food pyramid with this My Plate thing. But the thing is, everyone still talks about the food pyramid because it's so ingrained in everyone's mind, right? And it's so easy to think about it as a pyramid. So it's so dangerous, and it's been so dangerous for so long.
Yeah, I feel like it's analogous to the fruit juice. Like for so many years, people were told that have some Just Juice or Fresh Up or whatever it is in your locale, and that's you're doing your body a favor. And because that has been the message for decades, it's I don't know where the expression comes from, but the lie travels around the world twice before the truth has a chance to catch up. It's so much untangling, and I can't remember, some sort of philosophical type was like it's much easier to convince someone of a lie than it is to convince them that their understanding is incorrect. So actually to dial back to the truth from a mistaken position is harder.
And it becomes so convoluted that anyone that's trying to say, "Look, all this is a lie," and they're pulling on a thread and trying to untangle it all, everyone just like, "What are you wasting your time with this for? There's life to live. Let's go. You're a weirdo." And it's why
Well, speak for yourself.
it's why everyone like kind of the general populace is like kind of, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist, or you're just a weirdo, or something like that. um
Well,
because
the sad thing about the conspiracy is conspiracies exist. Like Joe Rogan tells the story about how hemp was demonized because the competitor product cotton, was going to go out of business. So the cotton baron basically, stood up the concept of reefer madness, and they need to find a way to destroy their competition by promoting their thing and their product and destroying their competition. And yes. I think maybe, yeah, I think this is a big one of Chafee. He talks about all the executives that were at the top of the tobacco companies, when big tobacco was on the way out, where they went into big hyper-palatable food. And so they took those skills and then applied them in a different domain, which had very similar health consequences. I mean, I remember when I was growing up, right? Big cricket fan. US audience probably has no idea what I'm talking about right now, but think of it as a superior version of baseball. And so you'd be watching a cricket game, and there'd be Rothmans, Benson Hedges, hoardings around the outside. And now you watch a modern equivalent of a P20 game, and it's a KFC Big Bash. I mean, what are we even talking about? We're just substituting one poison for another.
That's right. And the thing when you think about the tobacco executives went off and bought the food companies and started basically doing the same thing. I think at some point they've probably looked at each other and said, "We were crazy to do this with tobacco because food is something that people need, right? So it's a much easier sell and we can get them addicted just as easily. So it's like it's much simpler. It's a much simpler marketing exercise."
It's definitely like there's a wider range, you know. So you talk about like things. Well, yeah, I don't know. It's odd. Like I remember when I was growing up, there'd be this New Zealand TV show called Gliding On. It was like about, some sort of older 70s version of The Office, where there'd be people getting up to shenanigans in the office, and people would be smoking in the office on that television program. Um, it just, it's, and but and now, like, whenever we have a new starter at work, what happens? They roll out a cake. It's not actually different, really. I mean, like, yeah, I, I do try and keep in mind my colleagues' sort of assessment that you can't really blame the individual because this is what they've been programmed and this is what the environment has taught them. So, got to try and quit it on the being too judgmental and just try and do what's best for me. Say a polite no thank you to the mud cake or whatever it is that's on offer. Um, Yeah, which does sort of lead me to talk about what some of the challenges with the carnivore diet, really. And so I'd say that the biggest challenge is, for me at least, has been social engagement. Um, like I feel I've only ever since August, sorry, since April, I've only been out to eat with my wife probably twice, which is, it's a relatively small number of times compared to what it was before, which was maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks, and now it's gone to once every 2 or 3 months. And and it is definitely uncomfortable to go up to the proprietor and say, "What do you cook your products in? Do you use seed oil?" The last time the guy was a bit offended because it's like, of course we use butter. And it's like, okay, well that's good. I'm just not interested in putting any seed oil products in my body, so that's good to know. But it's a little bit uncomfortable. I don't really want to question the quality of the food that somebody's built a business around. And then you have some sort of office function, and you basically not really able to join in with what other people are doing so much. And you've got to, like, the last time that sort of happened with me, well, there's two sort of occasions that sort of spring to mind. One is the office function lunch, some sort of celebration of result or performance or what have you. It's like, you just got to do the best you can do. And that was my sort of assessment. So, okay, well, what out of this food range can I consume that is most aligned with my diet? Or you can go completely, I'm antisocial, I'm not going to engage, whatever. You do get faced with some tough decisions. But then something that was like a little bit similar but different is my daughter's boyfriend had his 21st, right? So he has his 21st at a pub, and they do the traditional pub nibbles, which is terrible food. And it's a pub, so it's beer, wine, and stuff. That's what have you. Um, we were able to order a cheese board, so it was reasonably expensive because it's cheesy type stuff and it's in a commercial environment. But there was a food option that was available there. And the thing that was so strange was, okay, it was July, so I'm not drinking any alcohol. So I just drank sparkling water all night, and it was actually pretty good. So we got to the end of the night. I don't have to worry about how we're going to get home. Well, I've just been drinking sparkling water. I can drive home. I'm not feeling like mentally compromised. I'm able to engage in conversation. Um, and the next day, I'm not compromised because I haven't got drunk the day before. And when I was there, I mean, the alcohol was described as a social lubricant. I was a little bit concerned that maybe the social anxiety would take over and I wouldn't be able to actually have any conversations. But I had some really interesting conversations with people, and all I was doing was drinking sparkling water. So run the experiment, and see what happens. It's not necessarily going to be bad.
Yeah. I find it interesting. I'm not in the situation often where I'm around people drinking now because I'm not going to be. I haven't drunk for more than 3 years now. But when I have been in that situation, it's really quite weird because as people get more and more drunk and they're talking to you, and you just kind of thinking to yourself, oh, I was like this too. I can't believe.
Yeah,
But the best thing for me has been I never wake up feeling like death anymore. And that was just such a because I was drinking way too much. Um, and those mornings were awful. And into my 40s, I was drinking like I was drinking in my 20s, maybe worse sometimes. And yeah, those mornings were just awful. So many written
yeah.
off days.
I don't think I really had. I wasn't really in that category of like alcohol consumer. I sort of like go through periods of life where when drink. Well, when we were living in Scotland, there's the single malt section in the supermarket, so I had to try out a bottle of single malt every week. So I was certainly up my alcohol intake during that period of time, but it wasn't really sustained for decades. One of the things that occurs to me when you're talking about that, it's just getting out of bed in the morning. Like I talked about staying at work at 7 o'clock and breathing away to get something out. It's the same at the other end of the day, though. Like I wake up in the morning, roll. There's no like, okay, I've got to warm up my shoulders. It's a bit creaky. That ankle sore, that knee sore. I need to sort of hobble up the stairs to get the first cup of coffee in. That stuff. It feels like in some ways it's subjective because it's almost like it just disappears and you don't notice it disappearing. Um, but it's just so counter that programming of you're going to deteriorate as you get older, get used to it, slow down. It doesn't have to be that way, which is just so amazing that actually, if you simply change what you're sticking in your mouth, then you can have a more fulfilling, less tempting, um, um, more engaging life experience. And all it takes is changing what you stick in your mouth.
Right. And the ironic thing, we talked earlier about how everyone wants to find a button to cure whatever's wrong with them or to,
That is ironic.
whatever. And it's
Yeah.
ironic because carnivore is actually that button, because you switch to carnivore, you get out of the way, your body can finally start healing and you feel better.
But Dave, 95% of people aren't genetically compatible with carnivore.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. I
Mm.
was just because all I could think of when she said that was okay. Well, the fossil record doesn't match up with that assessment. Well, not even necessarily the fossil record. You go back pre-agricultural revolution, so pre 10,000 years ago. You look at dental structure. You look at brain size. Would you believe that 12,000 years ago, human brains were bigger than they are today as a consequence of a superior nutrition? How can it be that 12,000 years ago, humans had superior nutrition than they do in modern times? It makes no sense. So you think about like brain capacity, you think about, we haven't even talked about stage 4 diabetes, you think about mental decline, diabetes. You talk about like overwhelming demands being placed on the medical system as a consequence of essentially inflammatory disease taking over the West. You talk about human dental structure being inferior to what it was pre, putting soft, mushy food in babies' mouths. There's just not enough space in the jaw now for the teeth that exist that we've evolved to use to be able to consume that natural human diet. Um, it just seems that there's a degree of hubris that humans have to think that they know better than nature, and actually the solve to a lot of problems is actually taking a look in the past. How did we do it before, and how about we replicate that? Now, one of the examples that sort of fits into that category is like when I was growing up, my grandparents would get laughed out of the room for boiling the hell out of the vegetables and overcooking them. But now, from what I can tell, actually, in order to take away the toxins out of things like cabbage, you need to boil the hell out of them. The worst thing you can do when it comes to consuming some of that stuff is to not process it properly. The German method of creating sauerkraut out of cabbage is probably the healthiest way you can consume cabbage. How is it that we knew this 100 years ago, but for some reason, in the modern world, it's like, okay, well, we're sort of heading into chafy territory here. It's like you go out and you eat anything that you see in the landscape, chances are it's going to kill you. Then we've got the smaller subset of stuff which we can sort of survive on and cope with, and that smaller subset of stuff has been completely engineered outside of its original state. So, like an apple looks nothing like an apple. I can't remember what the color of a carrot used to be, but it certainly wasn't orange. We've got this whole range of produce that has evolved out of the agricultural revolution into stuff that doesn't even resemble what it used to be. And then to go prior to the agricultural revolution, we weren't even, maybe it was like, for two months of the year, there might be some fruit or berries around that you might be able to, gorge on and supplement yourself with and have a bit of a change up and maybe put on some fat for the winter like a bear does. But that certainly wasn't the 365-day diet that humans consumed.
Right. And, just on that as well, everyone talks about how cow farts or cow burps or whatever are destroying the environment. But, we didn't have all these fruits and veggies available all year round. And there's certainly in a location, they're certainly not available all year round. So they've got to get to the supermarket some way. And that involves a lot more emissions and pollution than, the odd burp from a cow.
Yeah, I'll give you the tip there. You probably don't want me to get me started on the climate cultist, because I go into the Thomas Sowell again. Like when I was growing up, we had an incinerator in the kitchen, right? And so any rubbish that the house produced got chucked into the incinerator and burned. And the negative environmental consequence of that would have been emissions and also particulates in the atmosphere, which absolutely are terrible for human health, the particulates in the atmosphere. Um, but what it's been replaced with is we're just digging holes in the ground and pretending that the problem's gone away. Filling the holes in with human waste. I mean, are you honestly telling me that that's a sustainable answer? It doesn't make any sense. And then, you think about like, the world is something, I can't remember what the stat is. It's something like a landmass the size of North America is green as a consequence of increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that wasn't green 50 years ago. There's like, it's not, the greenhouse effect isn't a runaway effect. It's actually a correcting mechanism. You can't actually get beyond a certain point. And it sort of ties back into, one of the, almost like it's a trauma afflicting the West and the young generation around nihilism and being forced to confront problems which they can't actually make a material difference to, and being told that the world is going to end as a consequence of these things that they have no control over. I mean, when I was my daughter's age, we're going to, the human population was going to spread like a plague over the planet. There's going to be insufficient resources to feed people, and we're going to enter into an ice age, and we're going to be killed by the cold. Now we have, well, the problem in the West at least isn't a resource insufficiency, it's we're too fat. and we were eating the wrong food, and we got an obesity problem, not a an anorexia or a malnutrition problem in that way. It's it makes no sense. And so I would describe myself as pretty environmental. I've got a compost bin. We've got some chickens out the back. Um, I enjoy spending time in the outdoors. New Zealand's amazing for it. Mountain to the sea, and you can just drive there in 3 minutes, and you can be up in the Southern Alps in the South Island at least, or on some sort of roaring beach on the west coast that's in mountainous waves, or visit some sort of sandy beach on the east coast. It's an amazing environment, um, and the concept of getting out earth moving equipment, making some room in some valleys, putting it in with landfill, covering it over the top, and then finding the next one. It just drives me bonkers. It just makes no sense. There's got to be a better way to actually be sustainable, look after the environment, and without saying, okay, we're going to pay some carbon tax credits and that's going to fix the problem. It doesn't really work like that. So I'm definitely a big fan of the concept of localism. What can you do at your level to support your environment? Um, yeah, yeah, and try
Yeah.
and try and confront things that you can actually have a material impact over, rather than starting into the zeitgeist about things that you can't have any impact on at all.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a good way of looking at it. Um, so one thing we didn't talk about regarding your carnivore journey is how do you eat each day? Like, are you doing just eating when you're hungry, or are you doing like 2 meals a day? Or
Before I started the carnivore diet, I was doing intermittent fasting, so I didn't have, so I just basically skipped breakfast. I wouldn't necessarily say I could say no to the bag of potato chips the evening before, but I would skip breakfast. Um, and I've really just followed that pattern. So what I do is I have some low carb biltong, sort of in my car or in my office drawer, in my room for an emergency, if I desperately need something. We've got, like a mountain of eggs coming out of my wife's got crazy about chickens. She's got, I think it's like some 8 baby chickens in the garage with a lamp at the moment, and I spend my time constructing chicken cages out the backyard for bantams and regular chickens. So we got like a fairly large incoming torrent of eggs. And I certainly have a preference for ruminant, red meat, but whatever works. So yeah, but to your question, just it's a 2 meals a day scenario. Generally, my wife is gracious enough to cook dinner, and there's leftovers for lunch, and then that's us.
it's awesome, and that's one of the other great things about it is it's easy prep, it's easy cleanup, and there's not so much thinking involved. Like, oh, I had this yesterday, I don't want to have this today again.
Yeah, like you can't overstate the thinking. Like I talked about, like having an increased capacity for mental outcomes, but I'm sure that part of that is because I'm not hungry all the time, and I'm not thinking about what I want to have as my next meal. So all I know that if I get hungry and there's nothing in the fridge, I can just have some biltong and I'll be fine. Um, yeah, and it's even the relationship between food and exercise. Like you sort of think that, okay, well, I'm about to do some exercise, maybe walk up a hill, or go for a walk in the bush or something. I need to have something to eat. That's not actually true. Like anything that you eat isn't actually available for conversion into energy for a number of hours. You've just been told to think that, so like I used to go for a walk in the bush and take my backpack and have a couple of pieces of fruit and half a dozen muesli bars or whatever it is. But that's not actually doing anyone any good other than just weighing my pack down. It's not actually going to give me energy to do anything when I'm on my walk, because anything that I eat when I'm on my walk is only going to be available as an energy output after I finish walking. It makes no sense. But we've sort of been programmed to think that way, especially with that carbohydrate first energy model. It's like the theory is you have some pasta, then you're ready to roll. But it's not actually that simple.
The interesting thing about when you think of carbohydrates as the primary energy source, like that's what a lot of traditional traditional nutritionists or whatever will hit you with. It's like, well, you need to eat carbohydrates. That's your body burns carbohydrates first, and to make glucose for your brain, and that's why it's essential. And it's like, well, if that's the case, well, actually what you're telling me is alcohol is your body's primary fuel source because it burns that first.
Well, the thing it sort of reminds me of that conversation I was talking about with 95% of humans aren't genetically adapted to be carnivore, because it reminds me of um, the concept that the human body can only cope with 4 grams of glucose in its bloodstream at any one time. Anything above that is having a degrading effect on your internal processing system, so insulin response, etc. And so to overload your body, you're just causing. It sort of goes back to what I was saying at the start around you get out of the way of your body's physiology. And what you're doing in that situation is you're actually making problems for your body to have to address. But like the alcohol, like I could consume half a bottle of whiskey, and now my body has got to work out what is it going to do with this, how is it going to process it, how is it going to excrete this toxicity out of my system. And so what you really want to be doing is you're wanting to be feeding that engine. And the other sort of thing that strikes me about even that whole concept of what does the body need is with red meat, your body can, was it glycogenesis, whatever that process is, where
Gluconeogenesis.
yeah, you can actually create the glucose you need out of red meat. So this is going back to I can't believe that fundamentally I've only eaten red meat since April, and why am I not dead? And the reason why I'm not dead is because the human body can extract everything that it needs to thrive from red meat. You cannot say the same thing about vegetables. If you're having a vegan diet, you're going to require some serious supplementation to get the B12 that you need, because the human body can't manufacture that stuff out of those inputs. And the other sort of aspect of that whole nutritional conversation is bioavailability. Like when you eat something that is animal based, your body has evolved to process that. So the consequences are bioavailable, and you can convert it into the downstream components that your body needs to thrive. You might like eat some spinach, but your body isn't actually able to convert that spinach into the iron that it needs to be able to actually support the metabolic function. So even though, say in the tin, X amount of daily iron requirement, that is nonsense.
That's what it makes me laugh when you'll hear vegans say, "We are meant to be vegan. We are meant to be eating a plant-based diet." And it's like, well, who was making the supplements 10,000 years ago?
You were Dave. You're 10,000 years old. No. Yeah. Yeah.
It's yeah, it's like, what is it? Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is probably the one that's correct.
Yeah. Which is, well, I quite like that Ice Age analogy, Like, you can just imagine, humans sort of spreading around the planet 50,000 years ago. Then the temperature cools, the thing turns into a snowball. The only nutritional source available for humans is, a large mega um, um, people that, human beings that have adapted and evolved to survive on plants. They can't survive; they die. And the segment of the human population that is able to survive and thrive in those hostile conditions, like many more people die of cold than die of heat in the modern world. You can only imagine living in the Ice Age. I mean, those are some pretty tough fellas, and ladies. And so they all they have to consume for their nutritional requirement is megafauna, and that it's so simple. And modern equivalent of a megafauna is buffalo, if you're in North America or something. bison, but and then if you're living in like a Anglo state like New Zealand or Australia or UK, then you're talking beef and sheep. You know, and
Right.
those animals. The reason why, I guess your audience would know 100%, but the reason why those animals have superior nutritional value to the human body is because they extract the most amount of nutrients out of what it is that they're eating that makes its
Mm.
way into the muscle tissue, and then it's bioavailable to humans, as opposed to like a chicken or something. There's just not so much nutritional value in that.
Right, right.
And it's the sort of thing with the eggs, the egg is it just drives me bonkers. I don't know what it's like in Japan or in Australia, but certainly in New Zealand, the New Zealand Diabetics Association counsels against eating too many eggs. What are you even talking about, Dave? This makes no sense. It's that whole thing about if you eat fat, then you will be fat. If you eat an egg that's got cholesterol, then your cholesterol will go up. This is a fake narrative. It doesn't actually make sense.
Yeah, we were talking about the supermarket earlier. I've got a story about the supermarket. I was in line behind someone the other day, and they had you don't in most supermarkets in Japan, you don't have shopping carts. They just have tiny little like metal things that you put baskets on top of and underneath. So basically you're just filling up shopping baskets. So there's a guy in front of me, he's got two shopping baskets and they are jam-packed. They're full. And everything in there is a box. It's like cakes, it's like processed foods, it's cereals, it's biscuits, it's everything. Like everything is ultra processed. Everything's in a shiny box with a nutrition label. Sadly, no nutrition, but everything it was boxed, right? Except in these two baskets, he had 3 packets of eggs, right? And I'm just looking at that and I'm thinking, you know, 2 years from now, when that guy's at the doctor finding out he's got type 2 diabetes or something, and the doctor will be saying to him, it was the eggs, mate. It was the eggs.
Well,
You
obviously,
know?
Dave. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just we're in an upside down world.
yeah. That is so strange. The thing when you're talking about telling that story about how Japanese people shop in the supermarket, it reminds me of how supermarket trolleys got introduced in the West. Because before supermarket trolleys, people used to just rock up and they'd get a pay. They'd maybe have a basket or put stuff in their handbag or whatever it is. Walk around the supermarket, and go to the front, and they'd get put into a paper bag or whatever it was. But in order to increase sales per trip, um, they introduced this concept of supermarket trolleys, and people were like, "Well, this is what guess it's mostly females doing the shopping in those days, but to use a supermarket trolley would be a sign of weakness. And so people were pretty resistant to use the supermarket trolleys. So what they did was they actually paid people to go around to pretend to shop with supermarket trolleys to encourage people to use supermarket trolleys to load up with more stuff so that the supermarket could make more revenue per transaction. And so it's quite interesting, like with what you're saying there, that still, because you said they're small baskets, right? So there's two, one on top, one on the bottom. So that because like in New Zealand, like you got this big, massive truck that you're pushing around the
It's
supermarket
like a
designed
Costco
to kiss.
style kind of.
Yeah, you can well, especially when you can compare it to like carnivore or keto, where all you've got in there is some fruit and vegetables and meat if you're on keto, and if you're on the carnivore diet, then the only place you're going is the meat aisle and maybe the dairy aisle for some butter or some cheese or some cream. But there's just nothing in your supermarket trolley. You don't actually need all that space. And it is so true what you're saying about the simplicity. Like we make our own ghee so we can cook at high temperature with no seed oils out of a natural product, which is basically got zero carbs and zero inflammatory outcomes. And just like, just what meat
Mm.
are we having tonight, love?
Yeah.
Mm.
So, do you think you'll stay this way forever?
I was originally thinking that I would be like pretty strict carnivore forever. I don't actually think that's sustainable. I feel that feel like zero carb is sustainable for me. I love mushrooms too much. You know, mushrooms probably aren't great for me, but I feel that um, um, I can't see myself going back to potato chips, cakes, rice, potatoes, vegetables. So I feel like, yeah, I just can't. There's just too many downstream consequences. I could not believe it when I did my beef rub, stuck it in the Traeger, cooked it, and I just had reflux for the first time in my life for 36 hours because my body couldn't cope with it. Um, so, I might run the odd experiment, might, uh, break it occasionally, but certainly I can't really see a state where the choice option is ribeye. That is the most metabolic healthy option for me. Well, and actually, at the start of the diet, I was like, oh man, these lamb chops are pretty awesome. But for some reason, I've gone off lamb chops. My wife has bought a mincer, and so she's been making her own mince out of skirt steak, cheaper cuts of steak, and pretty good. Like, the Americans call that ground beef, we call that mince. Um, but I've been very impressed with the quality and taste of the homemade mince that she's making out of sort of more whole unprocessed food products. So yeah, like I just because of the I sort of started listed off at the start. Eczema, asthma, weight, mental acuity, vision, um, puffiness, stamina, energy, sore shoulders. The benefits are such that it makes it pretty unattractive to go back to the way I was. Yeah.
Yeah. Michael, if someone did come to you and say, "Okay, I want to get started," um, if you were going to let's say they were ready to start, they've done their own research and they're ready to get going, but they're just kind of talking to you about it and say, "Okay, I'm ready to start. I'm going to start Monday." Um, would you give them any tips based on what the experience you've had?
It's an interesting question because it's that whole sacrifice thing. I'd ask them sort of thought-provoking questions, or questions that are designed to be thought-provoking. It's like, what are you trying to achieve out of this? How much burden are you going prepared to put yourself through? Um, if you are going to do it, I reckon at a minimum you need to like set yourself some goals, like commit to 30 days, commit to another 30 days, commit to another 30 days. For me, I went pretty much cold turkey, and I noticed significant weight loss in 3 or 4 days. You know, um, I would advise um, against being too focused on health and try and pay attention to metabolic. I mean, not health, sorry, but weight. Um, just think about just try and observe the changes that happen to your body and use that as a positive reinforcement mechanism to give yourself the persistence to go through. I feel like this is probably even more important for females. Is like try and find somebody that's a supportive person. Like there's so many people that you've encountered that look at you like gosh, you're crazy. You're not following the medical advice. You need fiber, you need carbohydrates, whatever it is. You need fruit juice. You need to knock the eggs on the head. There's so many of those types of people out there. You need to find an ally. And if there's someone in my life that was doing that, similar to my workmate in my work environment, he's been, we're blokes, so he's certainly not scared to give me a jab or take the piss or what have you. But he's certainly very encouraging in terms of 30 days. Give it a go. I'm impressed. You're doing well. You're looking good. Just some sort of positive support network. And I've also been blessed with my wife. Being supportive. If she hadn't, I don't think it would be sustainable without her support.
Nice. So, Michael, if people want to reach out to you, do you have any way of getting in contact?
No. Oh well, I'm on LinkedIn. I, I when I was living in Scotland, I was a bit more of a social media butterfly. It's actually been quite a bit out of my comfort zone to come onto your show because got to keep my head down, keep out of the the sea that is the internet. So I don't really have a social media presence. If you're desperate for a question, then feel free to message me on LinkedIn. And as long as it's your experience, my ability to respond timely isn't necessarily all the best, but I will get to it eventually. And yeah, happy to share or provide any tips to anyone that wants to get in touch with me on that platform.
Yeah, no worries. So, yeah, if it's okay, I'll link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Um, Thank you so much for coming on, Michael, and sharing your experience. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on. I just want to encourage anyone that's thinking about doing the carnivore diet. I mean, Dave's got such a range of videos from people under all sorts of circumstances, some pretty horrific medical scenarios that people have been faced with, and then there's a range of other content from the likes of Anthony Chafee and Dr. Sean Baker and Dr. Ken Berry that the content is there if you want to go and have a look at it.